What happens when you tell your husband your ex is just a friend, and he must get used to it? How does it feel when the only answer you get is a knock at the door with legal papers in hand? Can you still call it a joke when the consequence is the end of everything you thought you could control? I should have known something was wrong when Caleb stopped arguing with me, but honestly, I was too busy enjoying my newfound freedom to care. Jasper's coming to the party tonight, I announced, applying lipstick in our bedroom mirror. I know you're not thrilled, but he's part of my friend group now, and you'll just have to deal with it. My husband sat on the edge of our bed, methodically folding laundry. His movements were precise, controlled, the same way he organized his classroom supplies and graded papers. After 12 years of marriage, I knew his habits better than my own. Ivadne, we've talked about this, he said quietly, not looking up from Noah's school shirts. The way he talks to you isn't appropriate for a married woman. I rolled my eyes. Oh, please, Caleb, we're adults. Just because you're stuck in some 1950s mindset doesn't mean the rest of us have to be. I turned from the mirror to face him. Jasper and I have history, yes, but we're friends now. Modern people can handle that. Modern people, he repeated, his voice flat. Yes, modern people. People who don't get insecure every time their spouse has a conversation with someone of the opposite sex. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. I'm going early to help set up. Try not to sulk when you get there. The party was at our friend Michelle's house, a sprawling suburban place perfect for our crowd of 30-something professionals. I'd been looking forward to this for weeks, partly because I knew it would irritate Caleb. There's something intoxicating about pushing boundaries, about proving you can't be controlled. Jasper arrived an hour after me, loud and charming as always. He'd been my college boyfriend, the kind of guy who made everything feel like an adventure. We'd reconnected on social media 6 months ago, and I'd been careful to frame our renewed friendship as innocent fun. There's my favorite office manager, he said, wrapping me in a hug that lasted just a beat too long. Looking gorgeous as always. Stop it, I laughed, but I didn't step away. Around us, our friends were watching with amused smiles. They thought we were cute together, the kind of friendship that made everyone nostalgic for their own college days. When Caleb arrived, I watched his face carefully. He surveyed the room, taking in Jasper's position next to me at the kitchen island, the way my hand rested on Jasper's arm as I told a story about work. Hey, Caleb, Michelle called out. Grab a beer and come meet everyone. My husband nodded politely and made his rounds, shaking hands and making small talk. He was good at social situations when he wanted to be. Teachers have to be. But I could see the tension in his shoulders. Your husband looks thrilling, Jasper whispered in my ear, his breath warm against my neck. He's just adjusting, I said, louder than necessary. Some people take longer to embrace change. The evening progressed with drinks and laughter. I found myself gravitating toward Jasper, drawn by his easy confidence and the way he made me feel young again. When he suggested we take a group photo by the pool, I didn't hesitate to pose next to him. Come on, everyone squeeze in, Michelle called, holding up her phone. Ivadne, Jasper, get closer. Jasper's arm slipped around my waist, his hand settling on my hip. It should have felt wrong. I was married after all, but instead it felt rebellious and exciting. Perfect, Michelle said, snapping several photos. These are going straight to Instagram. I glanced over at Caleb, who was standing apart from the group, his beer barely touched. Our eyes met across the patio, and something passed between us, a moment of recognition that we were crossing into uncharted territory. But instead of stepping away from Jasper, I leaned into him. You know what? I announced to the group, my voice carrying across the party. I'm so tired of people thinking men and women can't be friends. Jasper and I are proof that you can have history with someone and still maintain a healthy, platonic relationship. Several people nodded approvingly. Michelle raised her glass. To modern relationships. To modern relationships, I echoed, clinking my glass against Jasper's. That's when Jasper's hand moved from my waist to my hip, his fingers splaying possessively across the fabric of my dress. It wasn't quite inappropriate, but it wasn't quite innocent either. The gesture was bold, territorial, the kind of touch that said he wasn't intimidated by my husband's presence. I should have stepped away. I should have created distance, set a boundary, remembered that I was a married woman at a party with my husband watching. Instead, I laughed, loud and bright, throwing my head back like it was the funniest thing in the world, like I was daring anyone to object. When I looked up, still giggling, I saw Caleb's face across the patio, pale, silent, watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something colder, something that looked almost like calculation. The laughter died in my throat. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Monday morning brought consequences I hadn't anticipated. I was barely at my desk when my phone buzzed with notifications. Michelle had posted the party photos, and the comments were rolling in. Love seeing old friends reconnect, from Sarah. You two are so cute together, from Jennifer. Relationship goals, friendship edition, from Mark. I screenshotted the best comments and shared them to my own story with the caption, "When you're secure enough in your marriage to have real friendships and modern love long grow up." It felt good, empowering even. I was making a statement about confidence and maturity. If Caleb had a problem with that, it was his issue to work through. By lunch, the high had worn off. "Ivadne, can I see you in my office?" My boss, Patricia, stood in my cubicle entrance with her arms crossed. Her expression was unreadable, but the tone was unmistakably serious. I followed her into her glass-walled office, trying to project confidence. Patricia was usually laid back, more like a colleague than a supervisor. We'd always had a good relationship. "Close the door," she said. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Patricia sat behind her desk and pulled up something on her computer. "I received an interesting email this morning from the Morrison Group. Apparently, one of their executives saw some photos from your weekend activities." My stomach dropped. The Morrison Group was our biggest client, a conservative financial firm that handled pension funds and retirement accounts. They were old school, traditional, and extremely profitable. "I'm not sure I understand," I said, though I was beginning to. Patricia turned her monitor toward me. There on the screen was Michelle's Instagram post, the one with Jasper's hand on my hip and my body pressed against his. In the harsh light of my boss's office, it looked different than it had at the party. Less innocent, more intimate. The email was forwarded to me by their account manager, Patricia continued. Apparently, Mr. Morrison was concerned about the unprofessional conduct of our staff. He specifically mentioned that he expects the people handling his business to demonstrate appropriate moral standards. Heat flooded my cheeks. This is ridiculous. I was at a private party with friends. What I do in my personal time has nothing to do with my work performance. "Normally, I'd agree with you," Patricia said, "but when your personal time starts affecting our client relationships, it becomes my problem." She leaned back in her chair. "Look, Ivadne, I'm not judging your choices, but perception matters in this business. The Morrison Group represents 30% of our revenue." I felt like I was being suffocated by outdated expectations and judgmental attitudes. "So what are you saying? That I need to run my social life past you for approval?" "I'm saying you need to be more careful about what you put online, and maybe consider whether certain friendships are worth potentially damaging your professional reputation." The meeting ended with a warning to keep things quiet and a suggestion that I review the company's social media policy. I walked back to my desk feeling humiliated and angry, but not at myself, at everyone else for being so narrow-minded. I called Caleb during my lunch break, expecting sympathy or at least support. "Patricia talked to me about the party photos," I said without preamble. "Apparently some client complained. Can you believe that?" There was a long pause. Which photos? The ones Michelle posted. Someone forwarded them to my boss like I'm some kind of scandal. I was pacing in the parking lot behind our building, my heels clicking against the asphalt. It's so hypocritical. Men do this stuff all the time and nobody cares. What stuff exactly? His tone was maddeningly calm, like he was asking about the weather. Having friendships, posting pictures with people, living my life without asking permission from everyone around me. Ivadne, in those pictures, you're pressed against another man while he has his hands on you, at a public party, while wearing your wedding ring. Oh, so now you're siding with them. I'm not siding with anyone. I'm pointing out that actions have consequences. I hung up on him. That evening, I vented to my sister Lynn over wine and take-out Chinese food. She listened patiently while I recounted the day's events, nodding sympathetically in all the right places. It's just so unfair, I concluded. I'm being punished for having a normal friendship because people can't handle the idea that men and women can be platonic. Lynn set down her wineglass and studied me carefully. Ivy, can I ask you something? And I want you to really think before you answer. Sure. If Caleb had a female friend who touched him the way Jasper touches you, and he posted pictures of them together, looking the way you two look together, how would you feel? I opened my mouth to say I'd be fine with it, that I was secure enough in our relationship to handle that, but the words wouldn't come. That's different, I said finally. How? Because Caleb wouldn't do that. He's not the type. Or maybe he just respects your marriage too much to put you in that position. I stared at her, feeling betrayed. I thought you'd understand. You've always been the progressive one in the family. Being progressive doesn't mean abandoning common sense, Ivy, or basic respect for your spouse. That night, I found Caleb in his home office, surrounded by stacks of papers and folders. His laptop was open, and I could see what looked like screenshots and printouts spread across his desk. What's all this? I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up at me with those same calculating eyes I'd seen at the party. Just organizing some things. I moved closer and saw my own face staring back at me from several printed photos. The party pictures, but also older ones I'd forgotten about. Jasper and me at coffee shops, at another friend's birthday party, at a work happy hour where he'd shown up uninvited. Are you documenting my friendships now? I tried to laugh it off. That's a little obsessive, don't you think? Caleb closed the laptop and gathered the papers into a neat stack. I'm documenting patterns. Patterns of what? He stood up and walked past me toward the door. Patterns of behavior that affect our marriage. I followed him into the hallway. Caleb, you're being dramatic. These are just pictures of friends hanging out. He stopped and turned to face me. For a moment, I thought he was going to argue, to finally show some emotion about the situation. Instead, he said, Okay, Ivadne, if you say so. Then he went upstairs to bed, leaving me standing alone in the hallway with the distinct feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. The family dinner at Caleb's parents' house should have been routine. We'd been doing these monthly gatherings for years. Eleanor would cook pot roast, Richard would complain about politics, and Lydia would update everyone on her latest dating disasters. It was comfortable, predictable, boring in the way that family traditions often are, but nothing felt routine anymore. I noticed the change immediately when we walked through the front door. Eleanor's hug was shorter than usual, more perfunctory. Richard barely looked up from his newspaper. Even Noah seemed subdued, clinging closer to his father than normal. How's work, dear? Eleanor asked as we settled around the dining room table. The question was directed at me, but her tone was carefully neutral. Oh, you know how it is, I said, cutting into my pot roast. Same old office drama. Some people just can't mind their own business. Lydia looked up from her plate. What kind of drama? I felt Caleb's eyes on me but pressed forward. Just some outdated attitudes about social media. Apparently, posting pictures with friends is controversial now. What kind of pictures? Richard asked, his voice sharp with interest. Nothing inappropriate, just normal party photos, but some people can't handle seeing a married woman have male friends. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor set down her fork and folded her hands in her lap. Lydia exchanged a glance with her parents that I pretended not to notice. "Well," Eleanor said carefully, "I suppose it depends on the context." "There's no context needed," I replied, my voice rising slightly. "Either you trust your spouse or you don't. Either you're secure in your relationship or you're not." "And what if the spouse has legitimate concerns?" Lydia asked. Her tone was deceptively casual, but I could hear the edge underneath. "Then maybe they need to work on their insecurity instead of trying to control their partner." That's when Caleb spoke up. "Ivadne, maybe we should talk about this at home." "Why? Because your family can't handle an honest conversation about modern relationships?" I turned to address the table. "I know this might be hard to understand, but it's possible to have friendships with people you used to date. It's called being mature." Lydia set down her water glass with more force than necessary. "And is it mature to publicly humiliate your husband?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Is it mature to post pictures of yourself draped all over another man while your husband watches? Is it mature to caption them with passive-aggressive comments about people who need to grow up?" "Lydia," Eleanor warned, but her daughter was just getting started. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're using social media to justify behavior you know is wrong. And then you're gaslighting anyone who calls you out on it." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "No, you don't," Lydia agreed. "But maybe you should ask yourself why you're so defensive about a friendship that's supposedly innocent." I looked around the table, expecting someone to defend me. Eleanor was staring at her plate. Richard had gone back to cutting his meat with mechanical precision. Even Noah was avoiding eye contact. Only Caleb was looking at me, and his expression was unreadable. "This is ridiculous," I said, grabbing my purse. "I'm going home." I stormed toward the front door, expecting Caleb to follow me, to choose his wife over his judgmental family. Instead, I heard his voice from the dining room, quiet but clear enough to carry. They said what I couldn't. I stood frozen in the entryway, keys in hand, processing what I'd just heard. My husband, my partner, the person who was supposed to support me unconditionally, had just endorsed his family's criticism of me. The drive home was a blur of anger and hurt. How dare they gang up on me like that? How dare Caleb sit there and let them attack his own wife? I'd done nothing wrong, except refuse to be controlled by outdated expectations and jealous insecurities. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd worked myself into a righteous fury. I was going to give Caleb a piece of my mind when he got home. I was going to make it clear that he needed to choose between me and his meddling family. But when he walked through the door an hour later, he didn't seem interested in fighting. "We need to talk," he said, hanging his keys on the hook by the door. "You're damn right we need to talk. What was that back there? You just sat there while your sister attacked me." Caleb walked past me into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His movements were deliberate, controlled, the same way he'd been folding laundry that night before the party. "Lydia wasn't attacking you," he said finally. "She was pointing out something I've been trying to ignore." "Which is what, exactly?" He turned to face me, leaning against the kitchen counter. "That you're having an emotional affair and you're using our marriage as cover to make it seem acceptable." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "That's insane. Jasper and I are friends." "Friends don't touch each other the way he touches you. Friends don't text each other at all hours. Friends don't make inside jokes designed to exclude the spouse who's sitting right there. You're being paranoid." "Am I?" He pulled out his phone and started reading. "Yesterday, 11:47 p.m. Thinking about you. Today, 2:15 p.m. Can't wait to see you again. 3:30 p.m. Your husband looked like he wanted to murder me at the party, LOL. My blood ran cold. How did you get those? You left your laptop open. The messages sync automatically. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made me lash out. So now you're spying on me. I'm trying to save my marriage, but I'm starting to think you don't want it saved. The conversation spiraled from there, both of us saying things we couldn't take back. I accused him of being controlling and insecure. He accused me of being selfish and dishonest. We went to bed angry, sleeping on opposite sides of our king-size mattress like strangers. The next morning, I found him in his office again, but this time the door was locked. When I knocked, he told me he was working and needed privacy. That had never happened before in 12 years of marriage. I threw myself into my social life with renewed determination. If Caleb wanted to sulk and his family wanted to judge me, fine. I had friends who understood what real support looked like. Jasper was more than happy to provide that support. We started meeting for coffee twice a week, ostensibly to catch up, but really, so I could vent about my marriage problems. He was a good listener, sympathetic to my frustrations, and appropriately outraged on my behalf. You deserve better than this, he told me, over lattes at our favorite cafe. You're vibrant, intelligent, beautiful. Why should you dim your light just because your husband can't handle your friendships? It felt good to be seen, to be appreciated for who I was, instead of criticized for who I wasn't. When Jasper suggested we grab dinner after one of our coffee dates, I didn't hesitate to say yes. It's just dinner, I told myself. Friends have dinner together all the time. But I didn't tell Caleb about it. The dinner was innocent enough. We talked about work, our mutual friends, college memories. Jasper was charming and attentive, making me laugh in a way I hadn't in months. When he walked me to my car afterward, he hugged me goodbye, his arms lingering around my waist. We should do this more often, he murmured against my ear. I should have said no, should have established boundaries, created distance, remembered that I was a married woman playing with fire. Instead, I said, I'd like that. I posted a picture from the restaurant on my Instagram story, just the food and drinks, nothing incriminating, but I tagged Jasper in it. Within minutes, the likes and comments started rolling in from our mutual friends. Date night, from Michelle. You two are so cute, from Sarah. Relationship goals, from Jennifer. I screenshotted the comments and posted them with the caption, "Love having friends who actually support my happiness, instead of trying to tear me down. One are real friends, now blessed." It was a direct shot at Caleb and his family, and I knew it, but I was tired of walking on eggshells, tired of apologizing for living my life. When I got home, Caleb was waiting for me in the living room. His laptop was open on the coffee table, my Instagram story displayed on the screen. "Where were you?" he asked. "Out with friends." It wasn't technically a lie. "Which friends?" "Does it matter? You disapprove of all of them anyway." He studied my face for a long moment. "You were with Jasper." It wasn't a question, but I treated it like one. "So, what if I was? We had dinner. People do that." Married people don't have dinner dates with their exes and then post cryptic messages about being supported and blessed. It wasn't a date. It was dinner between friends. And my posts aren't cryptic, they're honest. I'm grateful for people who don't try to control me. Caleb closed the laptop and stood up. "I'm going to bed." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" He paused at the bottom of the stairs. "What would you like me to say, Ivadne? That I'm okay with my wife having dinner dates with her ex-boyfriend? That I'm fine with you posting passive-aggressive messages designed to make me look like the bad guy? That I don't mind being humiliated in front of our friends and family? I would like you to trust me. Trust is earned, and lately you haven't been doing much to earn it." He went upstairs, leaving me alone with my righteous indignation and the growing suspicion that I was losing control of the narrative. The next few weeks followed a similar pattern. Caleb grew increasingly distant, speaking to me only when necessary, and spending most of his time locked in his office or grading papers at the kitchen table. Meanwhile, I grew closer to Jasper, meeting him for coffee, lunch, and the occasional dinner. Our conversations became more intimate, more personal. He told me about his failed relationships, his regrets about letting me go in college. I found myself sharing things about my marriage that I'd never told anyone. My frustrations, my loneliness, my growing certainty that Caleb and I had simply grown apart. "You're too good for him," Jasper said one afternoon as we walked through the park near my office. "You deserve someone who celebrates you, not someone who tries to dim your light." When he took my hand as we walked, I didn't pull away. That evening, I found Caleb in his office with the door wide open, a change from his recent habit of locking me out. He was organizing files, creating neat stacks of papers and folders on his desk. "Spring cleaning?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up at me with those calculating eyes that had become so familiar. "Something like that." I moved closer and saw that the files were labeled with dates and categories: social media, messages, financial records, witness statements. "What is all this?" "Documentation." The word sent a chill down my spine. Documentation of what? Evidence of the breakdown of our marriage, timeline of events, financial records showing separate spending patterns, communication logs showing inappropriate contact with third parties. I stared at the organized chaos on his desk, trying to process what I was seeing. "Caleb, what are you doing?" He stood up and faced me directly. "I'm protecting myself, Ivadne. I'm making sure that when this marriage ends, and it is going to end, I have a clear record of why." "When this marriage ends? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you're having an affair. Emotional now, but it won't stay that way. I'm talking about the fact that you've humiliated me publicly and repeatedly. I'm talking about the fact that you've chosen another man over your husband and son." "That's not true. Jasper and I are just friends." Caleb picked up a folder and opened it. Inside were printouts of text messages, screenshots of social media posts, and what looked like receipts from restaurants and coffee shops. "Friends don't text each other 'I miss you' at midnight. Friends don't have dinner dates twice a week. Friends don't hold hands in public parks." My heart stopped. "How did you know about the hand-holding?" "Because I followed you today, Ivadne. I wanted to see for myself what these innocent friendship meetings actually look like." I felt trapped, exposed, like an animal caught in headlights. "You followed me. I documented you. There's a difference." He closed the folder and set it back on the stack. "I have photos, timestamps, witness statements from people who've seen you together. I have financial records showing money spent on new clothes, makeup, hair appointments, all the classic signs of someone preparing for an affair." "You're insane. I'm methodical. There's a difference." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Caleb's steady breathing beside me. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt a flicker of real fear. Not of Caleb. He wasn't violent or threatening, but of the consequences of my choices. I'd been so focused on proving my independence, on showing everyone that I couldn't be controlled, that I'd lost sight of what I was actually doing. I was destroying my marriage, alienating my family, and risking everything I'd built over the past 12 years. But even as I recognized the truth, I couldn't bring myself to stop, because stopping would mean admitting that everyone else had been right and I'd been wrong. It would mean acknowledging that I'd let my ego and my need for validation lead me down a path I never intended to walk, and I wasn't ready to face that truth yet. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was getting ready for work when my phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. Caleb had uploaded a folder to our shared Google Drive. It was titled Archive and contained over 100 files. With shaking hands, I opened the folder. Inside were screenshots of every text message between Jasper and me, printouts of every social media post I had made about our friendship, photos of us together at restaurants and coffee shops, and detailed timelines of our meetings. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the document titled Impact on Family. It contained screenshots of conversations between Caleb and his family members, between my sister Lynn and me, between our mutual friends discussing my behavior. It showed, in stark black and white, how my actions had affected not just my marriage, but our entire social circle. There were messages from Eleanor expressing concern about Noah's behavior at school, screenshots of Lydia telling her friends that she was embarrassed by my conduct, a forwarded email from our neighbor mentioning that she'd seen me canoodling with a man who wasn't my husband. Most damaging of all was a recorded phone conversation between Caleb and Lynn, where my own sister admitted that she was worried about my choices and thought I was heading for disaster. I called Caleb immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting, but got no response. By the time I arrived at work, I was in full panic mode. "Patricia wants to see you," my coworker Jennifer said as soon as I walked through the door. Her expression was sympathetic but cautious, the look people give you when they know something terrible is about to happen. This time, Patricia didn't ask me to close the door. She didn't need to. Half the office was already watching through the glass walls of her office. "Ivadne, I'm going to be direct," she said without preamble. "The Morrison Group has requested that you be removed from their account, effective immediately." My heart sank. Because of some photos? Because of a pattern of behavior that they consider unprofessional and inappropriate. They've provided additional documentation that came to their attention yesterday. She turned her monitor toward me, and I saw my own Google Drive account displayed on the screen. Somehow, the Morrison Group had gained access to Caleb's archive folder. How did they get this? I believe your husband forwarded it to them directly, along with a detailed explanation of how your personal conduct has affected his family and his professional reputation as an educator. I stared at the screen in horror. Caleb had sent my private messages, my personal photos, my most intimate conversations to my biggest client. He'd destroyed my professional reputation with surgical precision. "This is illegal," I whispered. "He can't share private communications without my consent." "Actually, he can. You're married, and these communications were accessed from shared devices and accounts. More importantly, several of these messages and photos were already public on your social media accounts." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Ivadne, I'm not going to fire you, but I'm going to strongly suggest that you take some time off to get your personal life in order." I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from the morning's revelations. Caleb had outmaneuvered me completely. While I'd been focused on defending my right to have friendships, he'd been building a case against me. While I'd been posting defiant messages on social media, he'd been documenting every misstep. The house was empty when I arrived. Caleb was at school, Noah at daycare. I went straight to his office, expecting to find it locked, but the door was open. The desk was clear except for a single manila folder with my name on it. Inside was a letter written in Caleb's careful handwriting. "Ivadne, by the time you read this, you'll have seen the archive folder and spoken with Patricia. You're probably angry, and you probably think I've betrayed you. But everything in that folder came from your own actions and choices. I've spent 3 months trying to save our marriage, while you've spent 3 months destroying it. I've watched you lie to my face, humiliate me in front of our friends and family, and prioritize another man's attention over your husband's feelings. I'm done fighting for someone who doesn't want to be fought for. You'll be hearing from my attorney soon. I suggest you get one of your own. The archive folder has been shared with my lawyer, your employer, both our families, and several mutual friends who asked for clarification about recent events. I believe in transparency. I've moved into my parents' house temporarily. Noah will stay with me during this transition. You can see him on weekends, supervised, until we work out a more permanent arrangement. Don't contact me directly. All communication should go through our lawyers moving forward. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. but you won't find it in this house anymore. Caleb. I read the letter 3 times before the full impact hit me. Caleb wasn't just leaving me, he was scorching the earth on his way out. He'd systematically dismantled my professional reputation, my social standing, and my relationship with our son. My phone started buzzing with messages from friends and family members who'd apparently received copies of the archive folder. The notifications came in waves. Lynn. Ivy, we need to talk. What is this? Michelle. I can't believe what Caleb sent me. Is this real? Eleanor. I'm disappointed but not surprised. Noah will be fine with us. Lydia. You brought this on yourself. Even Jasper had texted, This is crazy. Your husband is psycho. Want to meet up? That last message made me laugh, a bitter, hysterical sound that echoed through the empty house. After everything that had happened, Jasper was still trying to position himself as my rescuer, still pretending that this situation wasn't partially his fault. I called Lynn, desperate for someone to be on my side. Ivy, what were you thinking? She said without preamble. I just spent an hour reading through messages between you and this Jasper guy. Some of the stuff is basically sexting. It's not sexting. We were just flirting. You're married. Flirting with your ex-boyfriend is bad enough, but some of these messages... She trailed off. There's one where you tell him you wish you'd never broken up in college. Another where you say you think about him when you're with Caleb. How is that not emotional cheating? I couldn't answer, because she was right. Seeing all the messages compiled together, stripped of context and justification, made it impossible to deny what had been happening. Caleb blindsided me, I said weakly. He's been planning this for months. Of course he has. What did you expect him to do? Just sit there while you had an affair? I wasn't having an affair. Then what would you call it? I hung up on her too. That evening, I sat alone in my house. Our house, the home Caleb and I had bought together when Noah was 2, and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 6 months ago, I'd been happily married with a successful career and a solid social circle. Now I was facing divorce, professional humiliation, and complete social isolation. The worst part was that I could see Caleb's strategy clearly now. He'd never tried to control my behavior or forbid me from seeing Jasper. Instead, he'd simply documented everything and let me hang myself with my own choices. He'd given me enough rope, and I'd used every inch of it. My phone buzzed with one final message of the day, this one from an unknown number. Mrs. Hartley, this is David Chen from Chen & Associates Legal. Your husband has retained our services for divorce proceedings. Please have your attorney contact our office to arrange service of papers. If you don't have legal representation, I suggest you obtain it quickly. I stared at the message until the words blurred together. Then I poured myself a large glass of wine and tried to figure out how to explain to a lawyer that I'd destroyed my own marriage while insisting I was just being a good friend. The process server arrived on a Thursday morning while I was still in my bathrobe, hair unwashed and eyes puffy from another sleepless night. I'd been living alone in our house for 2 weeks, and the isolation was starting to take its toll. Ivadne Hartley? The woman asked, holding a manila envelope. Yes. You've been served. She handed me the envelope and walked away, leaving me standing in my doorway holding the legal papers that would officially end my marriage. Inside were divorce documents, temporary custody orders, and a detailed petition that read like an indictment of the past 6 months of my life. Caleb's lawyer had organized my transgressions into neat legal categories: adultery and inappropriate conduct, emotional abandonment, damage to family reputation, and prioritization of extramarital relationship. Each section was supported by evidence from the archive folder, my own words, photos, and actions used against me with devastating precision. The custody arrangement was particularly brutal. I would have supervised visitation with Noah every other weekend, with the possibility of expanded access if I completed counseling and demonstrated appropriate behavioral changes. Caleb would have primary physical and legal custody, with the right to make all major decisions about Noah's education, healthcare, and welfare. But the most shocking part was the financial settlement. Caleb was asking for alimony. As a teacher, he made significantly less than I did as an office manager. Normally, I would have been the one paying spousal support, but his petition argued that my reckless and inappropriate conduct had damaged his professional reputation and emotional well-being to the point where he deserved compensation. He was asking for 60% of our assets, full custody of Noah, and monthly alimony payments for 5 years. I called the lawyer Lynn had recommended, a sharp-dressed woman named Rebecca Torres, who specialized in difficult divorces. "I'll be honest with you," Rebecca said after reviewing the documents. "This is not a strong position to negotiate from. Your husband has documented everything meticulously, and most of the evidence comes from your own social media accounts and communications." "But I didn't actually cheat," I protested. "Jasper and I never slept together." Emotional infidelity is still infidelity in the eyes of the court, especially when it's this well documented. These text messages between you and Mr. Rowe are extremely intimate. Combined with the photos and your public statements about your marriage, they paint a clear picture of someone who checked out of her marriage emotionally. She spread the evidence across her conference table like a prosecutor making a case. "Your husband's strategy is brilliant, actually. He never tried to control your behavior or make demands. He simply documented everything and let you create the evidence against yourself. So what are my options? Accept his terms, or go to trial and risk getting even less. A judge is going to look at this evidence and see a mother who prioritized an inappropriate relationship over her child's stability. They're going to see someone who humiliated her spouse publicly and damaged her family's reputation." I left the lawyer's office reeling and called Jasper from the parking lot. "I need you to testify that it was innocent." A long pause. "Ivy, I can't lie under oath. We both know where it was heading." He hung up. Another abandonment. That evening, I called Noah. Caleb answered. "Supervised calls only," he said calmly. "You chose your desires over your family's well-being. Choices have consequences." 2 days later, old friends Michelle and Sarah cornered me in the grocery store. "We thought we were empowering you," Sarah said. "But those messages, that was cheating. We're sorry we encouraged it." A week later, a package arrived, my wedding ring and a note from Caleb. "I loved you completely for 12 years. It ended the moment you laughed." Enclosed was Noah's crayon drawing of our family, with "I love you, Mommy" scrawled at the bottom. I finally understood. I hadn't lost a marriage. I'd destroyed a family for attention and ego. 3 months later, I signed the papers. Caleb got the house, primary custody, and alimony. I got supervised visits and a small apartment. At the courthouse, I caught his arm. "I'm sorry for everything." "I know," he said quietly, "but sorry doesn't fix what you broke." He walked away. That night, alone in the silence, I had my answer to the question I'd once flung at him so defiantly. What happens when you tell your husband your ex is just a friend and he must accept it? You lose everything, and you realize freedom is just another word for having no one left who trusts you.